Eat this. Hi, everybody. Good morning. Thank you for joining me today on somewhat of an impromptu notice. I don't usually do interviews live, but today I've decided to do this interview live because of how important it is. And I just want to get it out there to everybody so that you guys know what's actually happening. A lot of people know, but some don't, that I'm originally a New Yorker from Long Island, and I lived in the Huntington area. While I was there, I had the pleasure of becoming close friends with a woman named Jenny, who is joining us today to tell the kind of story behind a story of what's going on in that area on Long Island with MS-13, immigration as a whole, and how kind of petrifying the entire thing is. Jenny, thank you for joining us today.
Oh, Tracy, thank you for having me.
So if you guys have been following my channel for a very, very long time, you'll know that back in the day, I was doing a show called Be the Media, and Jenny was one of my co-hosts. Jenny, can you just tell some folks what your background is and how you kind of got involved so intrinsically in your local community?
Absolutely. Well, for me, it started in 2010. We had an uprising of gang activity within our school district, and my daughter, who's now a high schooler at the time, was a kindergartner. We had a major uprising in the community. We started a group called Parents of Huntington, a Facebook page. And from that, we formed a civic group called the Greater Huntington Civic Group, which has since it's no longer an active group, although they try to pretend to be sometimes. And by active civic groups, I mean that they don't function like a legal civic group where you have open meetings and you take in membership and you vote for the leadership who speaks for you. It's typically the same guy who elects himself and runs around and says, hey, I'm representing you. So we formed that group, which I'm no longer with. We did see, well, our school, one of our schools, Jack Abrams School, had gotten closed, and it closed because there was an active shooter situation when the buses were loading in the afternoon, and that was July 21st, 2010, when they made the decision to close that school. Since that period of time, we have been able to hire a new superintendent. We have flipped our entire Board of Education, and we have dramatically improved the situation in our school, as well as reopening Jack Abrams School as a STEM magnet school where it's voluntary to go. However, the area surrounding the area, it's still, Suffolk County Police Department has come out saying that crime is at its lowest, but they do like to use statistics sometimes to bend numbers. I will say, personally, it has been very quiet for a while. And I believe that most of that is due to the efforts of the school resource officer that we had at the school that was doing a very good job keeping all of the gang element incidences out of the actual school. I think it was about 2014 with you when Maggie was murdered. That also made national news. And that was in our neighboring school district. Here we have Huntington School District and South Huntington. You were South Huntington, I was Huntington. And there was another civic group that I was a part of that was formed called Huntington Matters. And Huntington Matters is actually at the heart of the issue that we'll be discussing here today. So I just want to lay out that they are a Facebook page with a membership of 7,000. They're a corporation run by 5 people who elect and select themselves. However, they have been representing themselves as a viable civic group that has open meetings, which they do not, takes membership, which they do not, and they claim to be representing pretty much everyone in the town of Huntington in a New York Times article, which you were able to get caught up on, I believe, when it came out on December 27th, which is at the heart of this whole issue, because what we're discussing is a 2-year-old issue of a child named Alex who was deported. And that is at the heart of the New York Times article, of which every executive member of the New York Times was quoted in, including one of our school board members. His name is Xavier Palacios.
So basically, to sum it up for everybody, Huntington and Huntington Station in particular on Long Island, Jeff Sessions traveled out to Long Island a year and a half ago or so, and President Trump has spoken at length about it, is a hotbed of activity for the MS-13 gang. You can debate that until the cows come home. It is what it is. And having having experienced the area, I can speak to it firsthand, and I've done so before. There's been an influx, and we'll start maybe with the demographics, Jenny. There's been an influx of immigration to Huntington as compared to the rest of Long Island and New York as a whole that is not attributable to legality. In other words, there have been illegal immigrants flooding the area, and including, quote, children who aren't really children, right? So can you speak to that just a little bit?
Yeah, let's get into that one first. So it's interesting. We have one of the kids that was arrested. So wait, let me back up to the actual gang incident, okay? On Wednesday, there were two groups of kids that were walking home. And they go to this local Burger King, and where they all hang out. And they were sitting in the Burger King. One group of kids was leering at the other. They didn't feel comfortable. So they left and went out the back of Burger King when these other kids jumped out and attacked them with knives. And the police are saying there is bats, there isn't bats. So there's a little bit of information that we're not clear about, but we're understanding that it was basically West Side Story that happened on Wednesday, leaving two children stabbed, one transported to a hospital in Bayshore, which is on the South Shore, to prevent the gang issue from ending up at our local hospital, at Huntington Hospital. So they transported him completely out of town. The three children that were arrested were 20, 19, and 17. When they arrested them and they did their press conference, they said that they were on the Homeland Security known and identified gang members list. Now, the reason they are is when you come to this country and you apply for asylum, you are required to prove that you're in school. And New York state law dictates that we are required to educate up to the age of 21. One of these young men, the 20-year-old, had come here when he was 17 from Honduras, from a country where the age of legal sexual consent is 12. And he was a sophomore. So he was housed with 15-year-olds whose legal sexual consent age in America is 18.
Yeah, basically he was in 10th grade, right? I mean, at 20.
He was a sophomore at 20 years old.
Yeah, so he's 20 years old, a sophomore in high school.
And a completely different mindset, because he was in his country until he was 17.
So he comes here in order to get asylum. He has to be educated. They're not allowed to demand documentation to prove who they are, what their age is, etc. So technically a 30-year-old could say he's 20. There's no way to prove that that's not true. A 30-year-old could say he's 17. There's no way to prove that that's not true. And then they're cohabitating the same classrooms with students that are, half their age, basically. And like you've mentioned, the age of consent laws are different, and things are different, and culture is different, and all of that, even if they're not gang members, which many of them become and are. And so you've got a problem where the school district is technically, under New York state law, powerless to do anything about this. And these kids are mingled in with kids much younger than them at a different stage in developmental learning, et cetera, so on and so forth. And the one who perpetrated this attack, with the knife, was 20 and in 10th grade. And
you also have to take into consideration the fact that they're not necessarily going to school because they want an education. It's an opportunity to recruit and an opportunity to make money by selling the drugs to the other kids that are there.
So there's been, back to the stats really quickly too, there's been a 10% growth in the Hispanic population in Huntington over the past 5 years, I believe you said, with now the majority of the residents of Huntington, New York being Hispanic. I'm not saying that that's an issue in terms of demographics. That's okay, great. But there has not been It
is an issue because the housing ownership rates of Latinos does not match up with the growth in the Hispanic population within the school as far as children go, and there's been no new housing added. So where are these children being domiciled?
Well, that's what I was going to get to. There's not, if it was legal immigration and people were coming here legally and buying houses, we would be, it would be a clash of culture for sure, but it wouldn't be
As
criminal.
bad. Yeah, this is
Right.
too fast, too quick. Very much so. And if you compare the fact that our Latino population in Huntington High School currently stands at 48%, the next one down is the white population at 40%, and then the Black population at 8%. If you compare it to surrounding county, state, and national statistics, the average is 17% Hispanic population. We're more than triple that. But the fact that it's grown 10% in 5 years with no new housing added paints a picture that if you back up, and maybe if you recall back in 2014, Obama started shipping in unaccompanied minors. We absorbed in Suffolk County 8,000 unaccompanied minors in 2014. That's
Two of those people, I'm not meaning to interrupt you, but two of the people arrested were unaccompanied minors.
Well, I'm going to back up with that and circle back on one other thing. When you look at our numbers, it's clear that we have this because no one in our school district matches our statistics. So it's clear that we were forced to absorb more than anybody else in our district. And we just don't know how many are gang members. But to your point, even President Trump had brought up during his first address to the nation and had as guests, Evelyn, Nisa and Kayla's parents, they were the young ladies in Brentwood that were killed by the known and identified gang members. Those when Brentwood basically were just losing kids left and right. And they were viciously murdered. The mother died recently as well.
Yes. That was very strange.
They were identified, that was very weird. They were identified as being part of the unaccompanied minor program. So our Suffolk County Police Department does have a monthly meeting. And was able to view that meeting, and I have it available. In fact, we covered this on the other show that I do on Wednesday, about 4 hours after this happened. And we have clips of that available on our show. But the Suffolk County Police Department does allude to a Homeland Security list. And on that Homeland, these 3 students that were arrested Wednesday were on that list. So my big question is, why aren't we taking the Homeland Security list, cross-referencing it with the enrollment of our schools, saying anybody who's on both of these lists needs to be put in alternative placement and out of general population with typical students?
So let's get around to why it's been sort of quiet for the past couple of years and things have been manageable. On December 27th, the New York Times wrote an article, very lengthy article that Jenny had spoken about already, talking about how a student named Alex, who they painted as a golden child, who was caught doodling in math what was suspected to be using gang colors and gang symbols, was taken and deported, who had a brief relationship with, or a kind of high-by relationship with the school resource officer, who is placed inside the district by the police department, the local police department, to kind of manage the situation. And what the New York Times basically did in this article was propagandize illegal immigration in the area and expose the resource officer, what he was doing, the program the police have in place, demonizing it, and basically drawing a light to this gentleman and kind of saying, like, look over here, look what they're doing. They have this guy in here from the police department. And it was detrimental in that over the Christmas break, the article came out. When the Christmas break ended, the resource officer never came back to school. And that's when this incident happened. And Jenny was able to kind of garner some information, if she'd like to share it, about why the resource officer was not returned back to the school. So now there's no protection there whatsoever.
Well, there's been a lot. I think that's really the bane of the pain that's going through our district right now, between the parents, the police department, and our school district in general. That who took Drew away is the big question. The police are basically saying that he's not welcomed at the school by the school, which is untrue. But I have heard from what I consider firsthand information from Officer Drew that he was reassigned due to his own safety because MS-13 had recently put out a call to action to take out cops. And I believe that that's probably more viable than the other story, because on Monday I was at the Board of Ed meeting, and although reviewing the SRO program in general was an item of discussion, no action was ever taken. They never voted on it. So, and that was on Monday. The students returned to school the previous Wednesday. Officer Drew was already gone. So he didn't leave mysteriously Monday. He was already not there. He never came back from break. So no action was taken in regards to that. But now we clearly know that we do have gang children enrolled in our schools with our kids, and now we have no SRO.
So there's no one there to keep the peace. And a big reason, I'm sorry, but that piece by the New York Times, you were questioning with me yesterday when we were talking on the phone, like, why would they do this now? Why would they put this 26-page interview out right now?
Why now? What purpose? So to back it up, Alex was deported 2 years ago. PBS Frontline did an hour-long expose article on this exact subject over a year ago. There was no reason to bring out this horse and start beating it publicly in the manner that this was done.
It's basically a tactic that they use. Not only is it effective in going after President Trump, but you see what's happening around the New York area with de Blasio opening up healthcare in the city, et cetera, so on and so forth. It's a propaganda tool to kind of demonize the legal immigration crowd. But in essence, they're also making it almost more sympathetic towards these, quote, kids who in many cases are not kids. They're adults who are trying to game the asylum system and get themselves enrolled into schools. And, we didn't even, it's almost criminal what the New York Times did with this, really. They don't think about any repercussions when they do things like this, or they do, and they do it on purpose. One of the untold aspects of this, though, isn't just the fact that we've got gang members in school. It's that, if you guys don't know, Long Island and Suffolk County particularly has a very big drug problem in their high schools. Jenny, tell us about how that's being fostered by this as well.
Well, we are number one in the state of New York in opioid overdoses, our county. We're number one in opioid overdoses in our country, and we're not growing them in our backyard.
So they're coming in from somewhere.
And case in point, I hope that the good people of Huntington and the homeowners and others get together and form a class action lawsuit against the New York Times for the damage that they have done to the reputation of this town, as well as their housing values, and as well as the extreme loss of revenue in our school that we're being forced to intake.
Well, the funny thing about it is, and that's great that you brought that up, because there's like an ongoing battle, right, between whether or not we talk about this like it's a real actual issue and that it's a dangerous place to be, and whether we don't talk about it and say, but it's, it's still a safe place to live. I've been meeting a lot of pushback when I say, I was there years ago, so I left a long time ago, but I was experiencing ridiculous violence right near my home, and I left with that impression. Now, you're saying that it's been better since they've gotten the school resource officer in, and they've actually started focusing on this problem like very intently in terms of the law enforcement aspect of it. But now they're removing all of those barriers that were existing to stop it. And yes, will it make people not want to, come to the area to raise a family? Maybe, but it needs to be tackled. So how do you balance that, Jenny?
Well, this got really quiet after Trump and Sessions left. They basically, social media lit up the night. So he came in, he had that big meeting with the police and said, we're going to do all this. The media made fun that he said how we're going to beat him up, when they were just ridiculous. They missed the whole meat and potatoes of what was actually going on there. That night, social media lit up. Everyone saying, the police are raiding this, the police are raiding that. They're raiding. That night, they raided everything. And one of the end results of that were 10 kids from Huntington High School were picked up in one of the issues. And Alex was a part of the 10 kids in that, okay? Now they're blaming Officer Drew and that this kid rode a doodle and wore blue shoes. But if you closely read the article, it's probably more of a, because you need probable cause. And the federal judge saw enough information to deport Alex. So the
Especially when
problem,
they're keeping the guys that just did what they were, these guys that just got caught were released. So
but
think about
by
that.
the same judge, Tracy, the
Yeah,
same
exactly.
judge, out of the 3 kids that were arrested on Wednesday, 2 of them had priors and were released by the same federal judge. So this other guy, right? He wasn't, but he was picked. There was 10 other kids involved in this incident. Why they're so willing to say it was the school resource officer is at fault, instead of believing that 2 or 3 of those other kids in that 10 roundup pointed their fingers at Alex, and that became part of the probable cause of getting him deported. That's a more viable situation, I believe. And there's a lot of people screaming, we need to know, we need to see. And the fact of the matter is, there are laws protecting children, even the 20-year-olds enrolled in school, that you are not entitled nor privy to this information. But part of the Board of Ed meeting and what they're lobbying for is not only they want to get rid of the SRO program, they want our school to be a sanctuary city, but one of the other requests that came up on Monday was that they don't want any information that the SRO or security ascertains to be handed over to the police in any capacity without the parents' permission. And these are unaccompanied minors. So where am I getting your parents' permission from?
If their parents are even here, exactly. And if they are here, they're not legal either. So of course they're
Correct.
not going to give the okay. And this is the problem. There are criminals in school with your 14-year-old children, and there's nothing you can do about it. And the only thing you had protecting you is being demonized and yanked out because of this sort of leftist mentality that it's not fair to the Hispanic students that are there, that it's not fair that they feel prosecuted and persecuted. Well, they're not here legally. End of story. They do not have rights under the Constitution here illegally. I don't understand why this is even an issue. And the worst part of it is, like you mentioned, the funding isn't there to even educate these people properly anyway. And teachers are not speaking out about this because they're worried about the violence per se, but because
teachers are in the school with the students. They're petrified.
Understood, but they're also unable to educate these people.
Correct. Gigi, our good friend Gigi, she was a substitute in one of these schools, and she put a description of what she went through when she was a substitute, and it's terrifying. It really is terrifying.
It is. So just to sum up for folks who may be joining us now, the New York Times, in my opinion, basically spurred on the removal of the resource officer. Whatever the story may be that they're saying, I'm telling you right now that this New York Times article had a big piece of it. The resource officer that was working the relationships between the MS-13 gang members and working with law enforcement from the school. And once the resource officer was removed from Huntington High School, this attack on these students outside of the Burger King and Huntington Station was perpetrated. That's basically what happened.
He was gone a week, and then we had a gang incident. And a lot of people are saying, well, it didn't happen at school. What would he have done to stop it? He's not exclusive to working in the school. There's a reason our school has not had any gang incidences on school grounds. And it's because Officer Drew had developed a relationship with these kids where they trusted him, and they would give him information where he would be able to quell incidences that were going to happen on or off school grounds before they happened. Officer Drew wasn't just in the schools. He would be at events. He would be at outside events, at all the things that he was everywhere. Officer Drew was everywhere. That's how he got to know everybody in the community.
And now he's not there anymore. And as soon as he's gone, we see now.
And
listen,
15 years of knowledge and relationships that he built with these kids is gone.
Because we can't offend people, and we don't want to offend students who have come here illegally to come.
You do need to point out that one of the members of our Board of Education was the immigration attorney for the young man Alex in the New York Times article. He gave an extensive quote to them. And he admits that this person was his client. He is a Board of Ed member. He had approached many of the teachers in the school and said, I need you to write letters of support for Alex so he won't be deported. These are the same teachers that he votes on their salaries for, okay? But he's also putting forth some really scary ideas that are not equitable. Let me read you one of them here. Another board member, Xavier Palacios, called for expunging school suspensions from the disciplinary records of students whom school resource officers reported to ICE.
Why?
We must make a wrong right. If our district needs to create a new policy to prevent this from happening again, then we must do so. And somebody had wrote, and I thought this was a great quote, I'm confused by that message. The suspension of a student can be expunged if an SRO also reported the student to immigration. However, students with suspensions who are not reported to immigration have the suspension remain on their record. How does this right or wrong?
It seems like hoity-toity political correct nonsense to me, to be honest.
Well, it sounds like you're trying to create a politically protected class of people. As an inside Board of Ed member who happens to be an immigration lawyer and would stand to benefit greatly for being able to do this for his clients.
And so, guys, this is why I always say over and over again that being local and involved locally is so important, because it's little, it's what you think is a little issue locally like this that actually gains nationwide traction and is really important for other communities, because I'm sure that Huntington, New York is not the only community that's dealing with something like this. And so when Jenny came to me yesterday, she was sort of frantic and kind of scared, to be honest. She's got kids in these schools. Obviously, there's like an uprising that may be occurring. I would be petrified. My kids wouldn't be necessarily going to school if I could avoid it at this point. And a lot of people can't, not only because, they have to work. And guess what? The cost of living in Huntington is nothing to joke about. That's for sure. This even stems back years ago, Jenny, to when they were doing the housing developments and things.
Well, and that's the thing with when unelected people have too much perception of power. Okay. So let's go back to this Huntington Matters group, which Xavier Palacios, our school board member and the immigration attorney for Alex, is an executive board member of 5 on this Huntington Matters group. They call themselves a civic group. They use the Facebook membership total on their Facebook page of 7,000. They have written on letterhead in support of a Villa Dome mall, which nobody wanted in this town, but they wrote on letterhead that we, the Huntington Matters people who are representing 7,000 people in this town, want this mall. And there was a huge uprising. Nobody wanted it. Nobody wanted it. And the Huntington Matters group was exposed for doing bad things then. But here they still are now in the New York Times. And if you look at who's quoted, it's Huntington Matters, Huntington Matters, Huntington Matters. Xavier Palacios, school board member, but he conveniently leaves out he's also Huntington Matters in that particular bio. So there's something in me believes this 2-year-old issue, and now all of a sudden somebody's trying to push a specific policy. It just smells like an inside job to me.
So what would be the motivation, in your opinion, for this? What do you think the end game is for them?
Policy change.
So no matter, lives be damned, injuries be damned, like we're talking about people that raped and dismembered a young girl and dumped her remains in a field nearby. Like it's not a joke. This is not like, random robberies and stuff like that. This is hardcore violence. When are they going to learn? How many kids are going to have to die before they realize their policy change is ridiculous?
They had one in Green Lawn. I think the kid was 15, and they covered it up. I don't know how it went, but this woman went to the park with her daughter, stroller in the morning, and she discovered the body completely flayed out, the hands cut off, the feet cut off, the throat gashed, and the tongue pulled through, just right in the middle of the park in Green Lawn, which if you look at the data statistics, on the demographics in, you can't get more suburban than that area. It
Hmm.
is quiet. It is to have this type of gang activity happening in the suburbs. It's just, we pay the highest taxes in the nation, let alone in the state of New York.
No, I know, I know.
You know, you
I,
were here.
I know too
You
well.
got it.
Yeah, and this it people say, oh, they're exaggerating. Oh, there's no problem. I'm telling you, I'm passionate about this because I've seen it firsthand. It is petrifying to not be safe in your own home and to have the one thing stopping this being ripped out, the one thing that was working being ripped out. So tell me, I think we can, unless you have other things you'd like to say, we'll sort of wrap it up here. What are next steps? How do you feel having your kids there in that district? What are your plans moving forward? And like, what's next steps for this? How are we going to not let this disappear?
Well, I think everybody's just really terrified right now. I sent over their our school board says that they're in the information gathering stage. So I sent over my email, and I was hoping other people would send their email to board@hufsd.edu and voice their opinion on the SRO program. I know that our superintendent of schools is meeting with the other superintendent with schools, and they're trying to come up with a county-wide decision on the SRO program and getting like a contract in place with our Suffolk County Police Department. As far as everything else, I mean, there's things that need to be changed. The law educating children up to the age of 21 needs to be altered, and we need to have different type of school placement for this subgroup of the newly protected political class of people that we're starting to see. We also need to start reviewing the policy of cross-checking the Homeland Security list with the enrollment with our current students. Those are two big things that could be done right now. I think the scariest problem right now, and where most parents are struggling, is we know beyond a shadow of a doubt that there are gang members in our school. We know that we've seen a 10% increase in a specific demographic in our school in 5 years, and we don't know how many of those are actual gang members right now.
And speaking out about this is not necessarily the safest thing in such a small area with so much going on.
No, we've already received that's already happened. Yes, that's
And
happened.
so you're being threatened because you're speaking out about this and trying to do something to stop it. And that's scary. And especially scary because in New York, you can't protect yourself
Correct.
unless you want to be illegally carrying a weapon like they do.
I cannot legally protect myself. Nope.
Just think about that, guys. It's terrifying. So what?
And we're legally required to send our children to school.
Yeah, it's not easy to homeschool in New York. It's damn near impossible,
It's
actually.
almost impossible to try to homeschool in New York.
It is, and and it's not an option for a lot of people to just pick up and leave either.
I'm also required to give proof of residency. I pretty much have to show everything. I have to re-register my children every few years, as well as complete immunization records according to New York schedule.
Well, no, but they don't have to do that though, Jenny. Just
Correct.
your
Correct.
I mean, and that's the other thing. Like, the amount of privacy you lose as a parent with children in districts in New York is disgusting. And then
legal, you're bound to all these things. It's almost like I want to rip up my social security card and sneak in.
yeah, you're better off. You have more rights as in
I have more privacy.
yeah. Yep. Well, listen, let's keep you out in the forefront, Jenny. I'm glad I was able to do this with you because it's a super important issue. Tell everybody where they can watch the local show that you ladies do every week.
Oh, sure. Well, you just type in hashtag Be the Media Huntington here on YouTube. And in fact, Tracy taught me how to do this.
You're a good learner.
I can't. That was so funny. You were like, I can't do it this night. Can you do it? You taught me, and now we've made something local with it. I know I don't have even an inkling of the subscribers that you have, but we're hyper local and we're proud of every subscriber we do have.
Look,
Uh,
you listen, Jenny, you don't need subscribers to be effective, okay? What you've done for Huntington has been awe-inspiring. You're a wonderful woman who cares so much about her local community. Your number of subscribers means nothing compared to the boots on the ground activity you've done over the years there, and the personal sacrifice you've made, and what's happened to you, which we'll get into another time, because you've spoken up for people who may have been too afraid and gotten real things done. So seriously, kudos. I mean, amazing.
Thank you. And I'm a firm believer that when we keep it in the light, we cover ourselves with a blanket of protection.
Amen. Well, listen, guys, share this video far and wide if you found this valuable, and if you want to get the story out there about how, the media is somewhat complicit in these things that are going on, if not completely complicit in what's going on. Pray for Jenny and her kids and the neighborhood that she lives in, and let's try and get this wall built and change these laws so that we can be safe in our own communities. Have a fantastic day, and thank you guys so much for being here.